Hi there, my name's Andrew Gill and I'm going to talk to you today about electromagnetic fields. Why? Well, EMFs are a key topic of interest when you're thinking about the potential environmental impacts that are associated with power generation, such as through offshore wind, and the transmission of electricity. This is a topic that we've been working on for many years now, but it's a topic that is kind of raised in profile occasionally and then gone back into the background. And so this has led to irregular research outputs. It's led to patchy and variable knowledge, which is not particularly useful when we're trying to really move the topic area forward to address the questions that are raised. And there's currently a lot of interest. Stakeholders are concerned about EMF. Regulators have been asking what we know about EMF. And developers have become keen to address it, particularly when we're thinking about floating offshore wind. We need further evidence, and we need better knowledge and better knowledge exchange. And also, really importantly, we need consistency in the approaches to understanding EMFs and how they interact with receptor species. So I'm going to talk about a couple of activities today that are part of a series of ongoing collaborative initiatives. The first activity was an EMF technical workshop where we drew together the expertise of different disciplines to provide scientifically robust and agreed ways forward of enhancing the knowledge base related to EMF. We focused on the knowledge requirements of consistency and realism in modelling and measuring of EMF, and it was held in person over 2 intensive days at the Royal Institution in London back in January last year. And we had a unique group of electrical engineers, modellers, physical oceanographers, geophysicists and geomagnetic field specialists, and our own biological expertise. The workshop aim was to provide an agreed and standardised approach for estimating EMFs associated with subsea cables within the environment where they're found, with using expert agreement. The objectives were first to agree fundamental aspects of calculating modelling EMF in both 2 and 3D for HVDC direct current and HVAC alternating current subsea cables, and then to determine how you should account for the cable EMF interaction with the local geomagnetic field, because that's part of the total environment, and how to account for the what's called motionally induced fields associated with water movement, such as tidal currents underwater. And based on these two, we then presented an initial agreed approach to modelling and measuring EMF, and the idea there is to provide enough knowledge to support licensing decision making, to look at future R&D to improve our confidence in the evidence base, to sort of set the approach for a standardized approach for understanding and dealing with EMF, and key knowledge gaps and recommendations. And this is all set within a report which is available via the Crown Estates Marine Data Exchange, as you can see here. The next activity relates to another OWEC funded project called the Flowers Project. The acronym is about Floating Offshore Wind Environmental Response to Stressors, which is currently an ongoing project, collaborative between ourselves and the Scottish Government. Within the Flowers Project, there is an EMF work package with a specific aim to assess a counter rate between sensitive species and the EMF environment associated with dynamic cables. The aim is to be met through the objectives of defining the actual EMF environment that's associated with the cables on the seabed and the water column, and that will build on the models that came from the EMF technical workshop I've just described. Then to verify the EMF models through field data collection at operational cables, and then estimate the temporal and spatial overlap between selected sensitive species and cabling routes, and all bringing this all together as a kind of version 1 method to estimate the likelihood of species encounter as a proxy for the potential risk of EMF to target species. So the EMF fieldwork that's planned is basically a series of surveys going out to operational cables, working with offshore transmission operators, and using a magnetometer to measure the magnetic field associated with the cables. And we're due to go to different geographic locations because we know that the interaction of the cables with the Earth's magnetic field can actually change the EMF associated, and therefore we want to go to different places around the country to verify this hypothesis for both AC and DC cables, and then use the fieldwork data and information about the cable characteristics to apply to the models that are being developed in the workshop. And then at the same time look at data that is available on species distribution and take that distribution data so that we know where the animals are and how likely they are to be there, and then look at that in relation to where the cables are, and that will produce a first stage method to assess the likelihood of encounter with respect to the species of interest and the cable. So what we're looking for in the methodological approach is to produce something like this heat map, which has the cables on there. The cable data that we've got from the field will then be added in terms of extent of EMF associated with the cable, and then the distribution of the species of interest will then highlight areas where there is a potential likelihood of encounter being higher than other places. And in this case, the purple areas would indicate areas of higher likelihood of encounter than the yellow areas. And hopefully you see this could be very useful when it comes to the realities of assessing EMF in relation to specific species, and then we can focus on the knowledge base required in the data collection for those particular areas. So that gives you a little bit of information about some of the work that's being involved that we are doing on electromagnetic fields. Hopefully you found that of interest, and any questions, be happy to answer them. Thanks very much for listening.
Hello there, my name is Matthew Witt. I'm from the University of Exeter, and with my colleagues at the university, Anthony Bicknell and Sam Gerher, we've put together a short presentation for you on the emerging results of the baited underwater remote video surveys that we've been doing for the Prepared project funded by OWEC. Prepared's active at two sites in the North Sea, the Moray Firth, which I'm showing you on the left, and the Firth of Forth wind farms that I'm showing you on the right. Baited under camera survey work, along with a range of other techniques, are being used at both sites, but today I'm just going to talk to you about the findings that are coming from our Moray Firth work. Just to give you an overview of how the baited under camera survey work interfaces with all the other things that we do about predators and prey for the Prepared project, I'm just going to take you through those. So the first thing that we'll talk about are the fine-scale baited camera surveys, and that's the point of this talk. But interface with that are also large-scale fisheries acoustic transects. These move up and down through the sites using linear transect principles that's being operated by the Marine Directorate and the University of Aberdeen. There's individual tracking of fish, which is being done between the Marine Directorate and Exeter, so that's catching fish, fitting them with small electronic tags. And at the base of all of the wind turbines, such as the one you see at the right, we have acoustic receivers listening for those fish. Sea Mammal Research Unit Consulting is working on a range of areas, but also one of them being fish energy, so taking the fish from trawls and putting them through bomb calorimetry to work out their energetics. There's acoustic detection array that's being fitted around the Moray Firth farms, this run by the University of Aberdeen. And seabird tracking is being done in the Moray Firth, in the Firth of Forth, and that's work being led by CEH and BIOS. So let's move on to the BRUVs. Here is an example of a baited remote underwater video camera system. This happens to be a stereo version. What that means is that there are two cameras that are focused on this bait box at the end of the bait pole. You can see the bait box here, and here's your long bait pole and the two camera systems. Using two cameras allows us to make estimates of body length of all the animals that we see. So we're using these to look at the fine scale responses of fish to turbine structures. We have two cameras that allows us to do body length measurement. The types of data that we get from these systems include species inventory, but from that we can determine species richness, species abundance, biomass of species, length and community composition. These types of camera systems, both mono, where you only use one, or two, stereo, where you use two, are becoming more and more popular now in marine ecological research. And so we've worked quite hard to standardize our bait type and the mass of bait that we use to ensure that the types of results that come from this project could be comparable to other work done around the UK. And we've been using bruvs now at EMEC in Orkney, but also off of the north coast of Cornwall at Wavehull. And through the years that these data can now really be compared because we've adopted this approach to use standardized baits and masses. So here's a video showing you how we manage a camera system. It's a good, calm, flat day at sea here. You can see the wind turbines in the background. Each camera system has flotation. You can see Lyle there hauling up the slack of the line before the line is put onto the block and crane there for it to be winched up. So we've been deploying 3 cameras per turbine. We also have reference sites, both inside the farm that are away from the turbines, but also fully outside of the farm. And that will give us important context to look at differences in species abundance and biomass. Cameras up at the surface now, you can see Sam's now moved in. He's also tethered into the side of the boat along with Lyle. And they're just lifting us back onto the boat. And once that's done, the camera will be rebatteried, new memory cards are put in place, and then the data are taken back and watched. We've done 108 deployments so far of the system. It's 81 hours of continuous video data cumulatively. And we've co-deployed some of these systems with cetacean detection loggers so that we might look at responses of animals, of the predators while we're simultaneously recording the prey. Just to make a point about how challenging this work is, that is a flat, calm day. We do need flat, calm days to be able to work with this equipment and not damage it, or there'll be a health and safety issue about working in incredibly rough seas. Out of 24 days in August 2 years ago, only 8 days were possible at sea. And so while this looks seductively easy, to some extent it is, the days that you can work are very narrow. And actually, it's not that easy to implement these approaches 20 miles offshore. So I just want to show you some videos now. I'm going to show you high density and low density of 2 species. In the top row of videos, I've got low densities of haddock and low densities of dab, which are these small flatfish, lamanda. And at the bottom, I've got picked out videos which I would class as kind of high density for haddock and high density for dab. And these are collected at a range of locations that are either turbine sites or reference sites inside farms or reference sites outside farms. So here you can see the short video. These are 2 haddock attracted into the bait box here. And then you can see other species in the background too. But this is what we'd probably call a low abundance site. Let's show you what the case for low abundance is for dabs. You can see them sitting here on the seabed. They're definitely interested in the bait queue and the plume, but rarely will they kind of in these densities move up towards the bait box. And then let's look at the higher densities. So here's what we call a high density haddock site. Probably got between 6, 8, or 10 individuals there milling around, drawn in front of the camera because of the bait, which allows us then to enumerate them. And on the right hand side, this is what we call high density dab. You can see now the dabs are lifting off of the seabed. They're very interested in what's going on. They can pick up the olfactory cues that are coming from the kind of the bait in the box. Yeah, so this is quite a nice example of the types of habitats that we're observing. So I was saying that the stereo system allows us to measure these fish, and just to give you an idea of what that means, on the left-hand side there's a static image from a bruv, and I've picked out some haddock and put red lines along them. I've drawn these in by hand, but the software that we use called Event Measure allows us to make quite accurate measurements, and you're literally going from the snout to the tail. And on the right-hand side here, you can see our estimates of measuring these individuals. And we've, certainly for lamanda or the dabs, we've got hundreds of measurements now. And the smallest individuals we can measure satisfactorily are between 100 and 300 mils. And for the haddock, you can see our basic measurements are from about 250 through to about 400 millimeters. And so these frequency distributions of body size are really quite helpful to tell us kind of what kind of age classes we might be seeing at the sites. So here's the kind of most interesting result that comes from the work. On the left, I'm talking about haddock, and on the right, I'm talking about dab. And what you'll see, there are 3 categories on the x-axis. Offshore wind farm turbines, so that's data collected within 30 meters of these complex turbine structures. And then to the right, we've got two categories of references that are inside the farm, inside OWF, but away from the turbine, and outside an OWF. And that's the three categories are the same on both plots. And I think the key thing I want to point out is a statistically significant difference between what we're observing at the turbines, so within 30 meters, and what we're observing away from the turbines. And away be either references inside the farms or references outside of the farms. And really what we're seeing is for haddock, there's almost a 2 times increase in abundance when you compare a reference to a treatment, the treatment being near the turbine. And for dab, the differences are less exaggerated, but still statistically significant when you compare what we see near the turbine to what we might see away from a turbine, be that either in the farm or outside the farm. We'd quite like to, given this project's about predators and prey, we'd really quite like to understand what the energetics of the consequences of this are. And so work being done by ScotMER Consulting and ScotMER is taking examples of those fish species caught in trawls and putting them through bond colorimetry. And what you can see here on the right-hand side is a plot where you've got fish total length on the x-axis, which is what we're measuring with cameras in live fish, and the estimated or the measured energy density of those individuals. And you can see now how we can take information on the body size, structuring and class from the BRUV system with the stereo cameras and link that in now to individual estimates of energy, so that for each camera deployment, we can come up with the summed amount of kilojoules per kilogram of energy at each one of those turbines or at the reference sites. The statistical analysis is still ongoing. We're refining this continually. We have an early stage manuscript being prepared at the moment, but we're quite close, we think, now to being able to kind of share the types of insights that I am with you now. So thank you very much. I hope that was interesting to you. We have emerging results from our fish tracking data as well that we'll probably talk about in the future once that element of the project is a bit more matured. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for asking us to present at ScotMER. I'm really pleased to be giving the presentation today and being given the opportunity to explain the POSEIDON project. I'm Victoria Copley and I'm the Marine Principal Advisor for Strategic Solutions in Natural England. This presentation is going to provide an overview of Natural England's approach to offshore wind and the OWEC programme briefly, and I'll describe the POSEIDON project aims, deliverables and our anticipated outcomes. And I'll give an overview of the data collation and data collection for both benthic habitats and highly mobile species, that's seabirds and marine mammals. And I'll give you a forward look to what we're planning on doing through 2024 and 2025. Natural England is the statutory advisor for nature conservation and landscape in England, and we have years of experience of advising the offshore wind sector on development planning issues. Many of the issues that have arisen and are culminating in impacts on our precious marine wildlife are often due to the poor siting of wind farm projects in or near sensitive locations. Our approach to offshore wind, which we published in June 2021, sets out our views on how to meet some of the environmental challenges presented by offshore wind expansion. We describe our aims and objectives, and these have been serving as a really good springboard for collaborative discussion and a template for strategic solutions. We have a deep understanding of the issues relating to nature, and this means we're really well placed to support the various initiatives and programmes which are beginning to address these challenges in close collaboration with government and other partners. Ultimately, the goal of our approach is to develop and support solutions which allow nature to thrive alongside renewable energy growth, in line with government's 25-year environmental plan and the net zero targets. The objectives are listed on the screen, and our POSEIDON project is the flagship for achieving the first of these objectives, which is to ensure that future offshore wind farms avoid environmentally sensitive locations. POSEIDON is one of a handful of projects funded through the first main call from the Offshore Wind Evidence and Change Programme, or OWEC. OWEC, you've probably already heard, is an ambitious UK-wide programme funded by the Crown Estate and partnered with the Department of Energy and Net Zero and DEFRA. It has engagement at steering group level from regulators, NGOs and offshore wind developers. So what is POSEIDON doing? And this slide illustrates the key project outputs. Existing data on seabirds, marine mammals and benthic habitats have been collated and assessed. New surveys have been designed to address knowledge gaps through collecting new data, collaborating with other data collection projects, factoring in confidence in current models, and priority areas for offshore wind development. These surveys are well underway. Work has started on design of mapping and modelling tools, which are expected to launch in the second quarter of 2025. Outputs will include updated spatial models for key receptors most vulnerable to offshore wind impact, an environmental risk and opportunity map to help guide future offshore wind development and feed into wider marine planning. Will include a clear understanding of environmental risks and opportunities for future offshore wind. It will provide information to support developers, advisors and decision makers, and it will provide a comprehensive environmental baseline platform. The key players in the project are Natural England as lead, the Crown Estate as funder through OWEC, key government departments and regulators, our sister statutory nature conservation bodies in the UK, Wales and Scotland, Bangor University and the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science, or CFAS. The benthic components of POSEIDON build on the data collation developed through the One Benthic Big Data initiative led by CFAS, which has collated existing data from multiple sources to model different aspects of benthic biodiversity. A 2-year benthic survey campaign has been completed now under POSEIDON to collect new grab samples from areas where there was least confidence in the pre-POSEIDON modelling outputs. These survey areas are shown in yellow and include parts of the North Sea, Irish Sea, the English Channel, the Celtic Sea and the Southwest. Grab, eDNA and sediment carbon samples were collected at all stations. Analysis of the samples is now underway. The data from the North Sea and the Irish Sea is expected to be published through One Benthic and the Marine Data Exchange early this year, and with data analysis for the remaining areas expected to be completed in summer 2024. The grey outlines in the Celtic Sea represent the Crown Estate's Celtic Sea floating offshore wind areas of search. Sample collection in these areas was prioritised under POSEIDON to support the Celtic Sea pre-consent survey led by the Crown Estate. For the highly mobile species, the seabirds and marine mammals, as with the benthic components of the project, the species work builds on the existing Marine Ecosystem Research Programme, or MERP, data collation. Gap analysis of the collation was completed to identify the areas and seasons where we know least about seabirds and marine mammals. Based on that gap analysis, a 2-year digital aerial survey of seabirds and marine mammals is underway in the central North Sea and the far southwest Celtic Sea. 4 seasonal surveys were completed of both areas during year 1, and the same 4 seasonal surveys are now underway for year 2. While the original scope of survey work was initially focused on English and Welsh waters only, additional budget was secured to expand the collection of new data to include Scottish waters as well. Seasonal and temporal priorities were firmed up in coordination with the Marine Directorate and Nature Scot, with 3 seasonal surveys east of Shetland now underway. All seabird and marine mammal data is being published via the Marine Data Exchange. So the forward look. In 2024, we hope to complete the seabird and marine mammal surveys of the North Sea, Celtic Sea and Northern Isles study areas. We want to publish all new data collected through POSEIDON via the Marine Data Exchange. And we'll be progressing an iterative approach to designing and building the mapping and modelling tools. Then next year, 2025, will see us completing the mapping and modelling tool build, and we'll develop guidance and training materials on their use. We will be launching the tools in July 2025, all being well, and the project will close in September 2025. So thank you for listening.
So I'm going to introduce the remote tracking of seabirds at sea project, which is one of the OWEC, the Offshore Wind Evidence and Change Programme projects. So first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the OWEC programme for supporting the project. So the objectives of this project are to trial, develop and deploy a new technology or a new application of an existing technology, which is the MOTOS system, to address key knowledge gaps on the year-round connectivity between SPA colonies and offshore wind farms, the movement of individual birds between colonies or the metapopulation dynamics, and juvenile and immature survival rates. And the focal species is kittiwake in the North Sea. And the project started in October last year and would, assuming the various different project phases run successfully, run up until the end of December 2028. The MOTOS system is a system that uses automated VHF radio telemetry, and it's comprised of a network of static receiver stations, which are the yellow dots on the maps on the right there, and these passively listen to signals from uniquely coded VHF tags deployed on birds. It provides distance and directional information, so if you have multiple receivers you can get locations, and it does this over longer distance than traditional VHF telemetry. Importantly, it's an open system, so each receiver station contributes to a wider global network of receivers, including, as you can see on the map on the right, a number around the North Sea. The project is structured into three main sections. The first part of the project is to assess whether it would be feasible to deploy these tags in principle, which is the desk-based feasibility study. And then if that's determined to be successful, then we proceed to field-based trials, which is in blue there. And then if that's successful, then we would proceed with full-scale deployment, which is in orange. And associated with that is the sort of desk-based review and analysis in yellow, and then the data analysis, reporting and dissemination of results, which is in green. The project team is made up of a consortium led by the RSPB, with the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, the Marine Directorate, the Scottish Government, BTO, the UHI and ERA, and BIOS. And it's supported by a project advisory group, which includes representatives from OWEC, from industry and from SNCBs. To be suitable for use on kittiwakes, we need a technology that is leg mounted, or it needs to be integrated into a leg ring, which allows kind of long-term deployment. It needs to be low weight and small size. It needs to have long battery life, and or it needs to be solar powered, so it works over a long period of time, and it needs to be robust to withstand marine conditions. And importantly, as well as the tags themselves, it needs to be possible to establish a receiver network, including on offshore wind developments. This slide shows the various different technology options that we're currently considering. So these are, on the left there, these are all MOTOS options, whereas on the right, there are some alternative technologies that we also considered, Atlas and LORA1. With MOTOS, there's two main companies, CTT and LowTech, developing tags. And at this point, the CTT tags look to be most suitable. So CTT currently have two families of tags which could be suitable for use in this project. They have a very small tag called Blue Morpho, which uses a shorter wavelength, and the hybrid tags, which use a longer wavelength. These Blue Morpho tags were developed for tracking butterflies and dragonflies and so forth, so are very, very small, but currently have not been developed into a leg ring for tracking birds, but the technology developer is looking into that. While the hybrid tag is suitable for tracking seabirds and has been nicely integrated into a leg ring as pictured there, but currently that's too big for tracking kittiwake, but potentially it can be further miniaturized over the next year, so we're hopeful that it will become suitable. So as well as the tags, the offshore receiver network is an integral component of this study. To be effective, it must be possible to deploy multiple offshore receiver stations. In principle, it appears that this would be possible, as there are examples of such receivers already deployed on offshore substation platforms in Belgium, And in the Atlantic US, there's been a detailed study which has deployed these systems on buoys and wind turbines, which was led by Pam Loring at the US Fish and Wildlife Service, commissioned by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And there's a link to the report there shown on the right. So we're currently in an early phase of the project, with this first gateway review following the desk-based feasibility review coming up later during this month. And then we would complete the desk-based feasibility review. If that first gateway is passed, then we would then progress to developing the field-based trials, with these initially off-bird trials, which would take place this year, and then on-bird trials next year in 2025. And alongside that would be the study design for a full deployment, which should be running between 2026 and 2028. Finally, I would like to thank OWEC for supporting the project, thank the project team and the project advisory group who have played an integral role in steering this project, and I'd like to thank you for listening to the presentation.